beyond the eighth grade or learn about a subject by saying it's against their religious beliefs. Do you agree or disagree with this result? Why or why not? What words, if any, are found in the US Constitution or in state constitutions that protect the right to an education? And how have courts balanced religious beliefs with other rights?
We agree with the ruling in Wisconsin v. Yoder. An individual's free exercise interest outweighs the state's interest in compelling school attendance beyond the eighth grade. The values and programs of secondary school were in sharp conflict with the fundamental mode of life mandated by the Amish religion, and their parents' decision to pull their children from school was protected under the free exercise clause. As established in Meyer v. Nebraska, the state had a legitimate interest in encouraging the growth of a civically engaged population, but corresponding to the right of control, it is the natural duty of the parent to give his children education suitable to their station in life. In Pierce v. Society of Sisters, the court ruled that the free exercise clause provided the right to seek private schooling.
The right to an education is not protected by the federal constitution, as established in San Antonio Independent School District v. Rodriguez in 1973. However, the court ruled that constitutional violations under the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause may arise if the state's education system fails to provide each child with an equal opportunity to acquire the basic minimal skills necessary for the enjoyment of speech and political participation. In 1982, in Plyler v. Doe, the Supreme Court held unconstitutional a Texas law barring children of undocumented immigrants from public schools. Several state constitutions explicitly protect the right to a basic education. 22 states, including ours of Connecticut, explicitly require free public schools or otherwise reference education in their constitutions. When Michigan failed to meet its constitutional mandate for such, students who couldn't read sued the state in Gary B. v. Whitmer. Students won similar cases in California, Texas, and New Jersey.
Beyond education, the free exercise right of religion has clashed with other fundamental rights since Cantwell v. Connecticut, which incorporated the Free Exercise Clause of 1940. This has allowed for federal review of state legislation under free exercise infringement claims. When balancing religious rights with other rights, courts should apply strict scrutiny. To survive this standard, a law must be narrowly tailored to further a compelling governmental interest. In Sherber v. Verner, the appellant had been fired for refusing to work on his Sabbath day and was statutorily denied unemployment compensation. The Supreme Court held that South Carolina's assertion of administrative convenience did not meet a compelling governmental interest. Justice Blackmun correctly opined in his dissent in Employment Division v. Smith that strict scrutiny should have been applied, which would have struck down Oregon's drug law as it was not narrowly tailored to address the government's compelling interest in regulating illegal substances. The law failed to account for peyote's long-standing role in indigenous Native American religions.
In response to wide-scale outrage over Smith, Congress passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which reinstated the compelling interest test of Sherber. The court later ruled RFRA inapplicable to states in City of Beloearns v. Flores. The 20 states have since passed their own versions of the law. In Burwell v. Hobby Lobby, the Supreme Court ruled that RFRA protects the religious rights of for-profit corporations, on whom the Affordable Care Act's contraception mandate was unnecessarily burdensome. Such implementation of the ACA was not the least restrictive method of advancing the government's interests, and the court rightfully found that the existing exemption for nonprofit religious organizations should be granted to for-profit ones as well. In Masterpiece Cake Shop v. Colorado Civil Rights Commission, the Supreme Court held that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission's conduct in evaluating a cake shop owner's denial of service to a same-sex couple due to sincerely held religious beliefs violated the Free Exercise Clause. The case was decided on a technicality of conduct, but discussed how religious liberties may clash with equal protection rights under Colorado's Anti-Discrimination Act. Strict scrutiny demands narrow tailoring of anti-discrimination laws as applied to religious conduct. Laws that are neither neutral nor generally applicable may need to contain exemptions to permit religious free exercise.
In Justice Scalia's dissent in Lee v. Wiseman, he argued that the court apparently thinks prayer to be some purely personal avocation that can be indulged entirely in secret. For most believers, it is not that and never has been. When weighed against other rights, religious freedom is paramount and must be protected from government intrusion. Thank you, judges, and we are now ready for questioning.
Thank you. So let's pick up right where you left off. If religious freedom is paramount, how do we balance in today's post-COVID society? You have potentially several school districts that are going to require students to come back to school but be vaccinated. How do you balance if there's going to be an exception for religious reasons? Should there be an exception for religious reasons? How should that be applied? Or in the alternative, should school districts require that vaccinations be done for the greater good?
So according to the Supreme Court ruling in Jacobson v. Massachusetts, states do not have to provide religious exemptions because under the 10th Amendment, they have state policing powers. And things under those state policing powers, they are allowed to ensure the health, to provide measures that ensure the health of society. And that is not a requirement. And states such as New York and Maine do not no longer provide the opportunity for religious exemptions to vaccines. And Connecticut has recently also removed religious exemptions.
Yeah, Connecticut's House of Representatives just voted this past week to end religious exemptions for school-age children to vaccines. And the main reason they cited was because there was a growing trend of parents continuing to not vaccinate their children under religious exemptions. And they found it would be better to act proactively and prevent an outbreak. And while prevent an outbreak to make sure that public health is our top priority. And so while they don't want to infringe on free exercise rights, when there is a compelling government interest in the name of public safety, they have the right to act in such a way.
I agree with what my colleagues have said. However, it's very important that it can be justified religious exemption for these vaccines because, for example, when the polio vaccine came out, Muslim fundamentalists were using their religion as a way to be exempt from getting the vaccine. However, it was later found that they were really getting out of this for political and social reasoning.
I'd like to throw a question at you. Given what was focused on at the outset in terms of Wisconsin v. Yoder and a parent's religious position, how do you balance a student's right to pursue an education that would guarantee life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in contrast to the parent's religious belief?
So there is a contrast because I guess in the case of Wisconsin v. Yoder, the Amish population can live in a self-sustaining society where they are staying isolated from the rest of the civically engaged population. So even though it's the student's right to an education, the parent still has the paramount decision in choosing whether or not their child participates in that education system. Second, however, there is the question of whether or not the parent should make that decision for the child. Actually, the Amish Society's Foundation on their website opposed a decision in Wisconsin v. Yoder because they feel that the parents are removing their child's chance at any life different from the Amish society and the Amish religion. And when balanced against these two things, at this time, the religious freedom should be paramount, but once the child gets older, they can choose to go back into society and once again engage in our education system.
However, in a society separate for the Amish, when you are preparing someone for the modern community, not for the specific isolated community in which the Amish live, you need to apply strict scrutiny. So students cannot and parents cannot just choose whether or not to attend class because the government has a legitimate government interest to create uniformity in education. It has to be narrowly tailored because it's far too disruptive to let students pick and choose when to attend and when to not attend class. However, the government can choose to provide such an option. For instance, our Staples High School allows parents to opt students out of health classes for religious reasons. And furthermore, in the ruling of Zorak v. Clausen, which was a New York problem releasing students from class in order to attend religious instruction, the court ruled that it doesn't violate the Establishment Clause because it's off campus and it's uncoerced.
Let me just follow up on that. What if, on hypos regarding Yoder, what about a religious community that sincerely believes that girls should not receive any education at all? And there is a compulsory education law in that district, and therefore that religious sect, like in Yoder, would be violation of criminal law. If free exercise is paramount, should the parents prevail in not allowing their girls to go to school at all?
Within churches, you have things like the ministerial exemption, where inside of your own like religious service, like a church or a synagogue, you are allowed to make laws that discriminate, or you can put people at the top and say women can't do this or men can only do this. However, education from kindergarten to 8th grade is such an important part of being an everyday citizen. Even if you choose not to, or if you choose not to engage in the rest of the world and you are in your own small community, you still have to know social skills and know basic things about our country. And so they are allowed to pull their student or their children out of school after the 8th grade. That is fair. They have learned enough that it is okay. However, in those formative years of age 5 to age 14, the child needs to be in school.
So the parents lose in your case.
In that specific case, for the first few years of education, the student should be in school, whether it be homeschooled or a public school or a private school that teaches them those same religious values. The student should be receiving some sort of education.
And so what about in the case if we're talking about, we know what the state's interests are while they're in school. What about if you're after school and you want to start a religious school, religious club, or perhaps a pro-life club or a pro-choice club at your school after school? Should students be allowed to do that?
Yeah, students should be allowed to do that, as ruled on in Good News Club versus Milford Central School. The Supreme Court ruled that that students should be able to form these clubs because it's open to everyone, not just specific religions.
Furthermore, in Westside v. Merchant, the Supreme Court allowed for the formation of a Christian club at school, even though the school was originally opposed to it. In these kind of cases, you sort of have a clash between the free exercise clause and the establishment clause. But if it's a student-founded club and the school's not actually supporting it, but anyone can join, then it's completely constitutional, it's completely fair, and it actually should be encouraged and allowed so that students can actively exercise their religion while at school and outside of school.
So what about having a prayer at your graduation?
Well, as Justice Brennan said in his dissent in Abington County v. Shem, he contrasted a difference between when the free exercise clause clashes with the establishment clause, and he talked about it in the case of chaplains, religious chaplains at prisons, and he said that the reason why religious chaplains are allowed is because the prison bars the criminals from, or the convicts from, being able to practice their religion any other way, or from seeking out their own religious ministers. And so he drew a contrast between that and between, say, having someone at a graduation or someone in school, where students outside of school can seek out their own religious practices. So that is an establishment clause violation because they have other means by which to practice their free exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Well done, Unit 5, Staples High School. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to Ms. Cameraman, your teacher. Just thank you for that great presentation, and the judges will give you feedback now.
Congratulations to you, and your teacher is right. You all did a absolutely phenomenal job. Everyone participated. You answered the questions. You talked about old cases, new cases. You talked about the Connecticut legislature and what they're doing. I wish that every student knew what was going on like you did. I will say I'll look forward to who is going to litigate against this Connecticut law, because it's probably already in the courts. I think outstanding, phenomenal. You understand the subject matter. Obviously that showed in your prepared statements, but in your follow-up questions, you guys were just as much on it. Fantastic job.
I agree with the senator. Very lovely approach. I appreciate the authorities that you cited, and especially your reference to your own local experience with your own legislative body. I was particularly taken back by the depth of your reasoning in terms of the formative years and the importance of the educational aspect that one of your team members took in terms of why the education, in response to the question of a religious group prohibiting girls from participating in the educational process. But very well done. Good luck to you all.
I agree entirely with my colleagues. What a spectacular presentation. And I particularly appreciated your deep understanding that often the two religious clauses of the First Amendment, the Free Exercise Clause and the Establishment Clause, are in tension with one another and create conflicts that have to be resolved. And you really understand that thoroughly. And I thought that was one of the highlights of your analysis. So spectacular work. You should be very proud of yourselves. And congratulations to your teacher and your parents as well.
And thank you so much. Ms. Kimmerman, do you want to say something to your students?
Thank you and great job, kids.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, the judges.
When one of you runs for office, make sure to let me know so we can send a donation. You did a great job.